The rain had not stopped for 3 days. It didn't fall like normal rain in this part of the Borderlands. It came heavier, colder, almost as if the sky itself had given up trying to wash anything clean. The ground had turned into thick, choking mud that clung to every step, every wheel, every piece of life that still dared to move through it. The settlement around the arena looked half dead, half forgotten. Wooden structures leaned sideways like tired bodies refusing to stand straight anymore. Smoke from small fires drifted into the wet air and disappeared without purpose. At the center of it all stood the arena. It was not built like something meant for sport or honor. It was a ring of iron poles pushed into the earth, ropes tied between them, and a shallow pit dug into the mud where people gathered like spectators of suffering. This place had no name in official records. It existed only in whispers, in transactions, in the kind of deals that never survived daylight. And yet today it was full. A crowd had gathered, not because they believed in justice or law, but because they believed in spectacle. Their faces were tired, some amused, some indifferent. A few looked hungry. Most looked like they had seen too much already and had simply stopped reacting. Near the outer edge of the arena, a man stood in a dark hooded cloak. He did not belong to this place, and yet he moved through it without drawing attention. His posture was calm, controlled, almost too still compared to the chaos around him. Beneath the hood, his eyes watched everything with a kind of quiet precision that didn't match the rest of the world. He was the Alpha King, but no one here knew that. To them, he was just another shadow among shadows. He had come without announcement, without an army, without the weight of his title. This was not supposed to be an emotional visit. It was supposed to be observation. Reports had reached him about illegal border activity, missing children, and unauthorized beast trade. Nothing more than confirmation was needed. At least, that is what he told himself before stepping into this place. Chains clinked somewhere to the left, pulling his attention briefly. A group of traders stood near a raised platform, arguing loudly with one another as if the lives around them were part of a business negotiation. Their voices were sharp, casual, almost bored. And then the sound of something smaller. Stumble. The Alpha King's gaze shifted slightly. A boy had been dragged forward into the center of the arena. He was small, no more than a child. His arms bound with iron chains too large for his fragile wrists. Every step he took in the mud looked like it cost him more strength than he had left. His clothes were soaked, clinging to his thin frame, and his eyes kept darting around as if searching for a way out that didn't exist. He was not alone. 2 traders stood behind him, pushing him forward every time he slowed down. "Stand there," one of them said casually, like giving instructions to a broken object. "Don't move." The beast chooses quickly. The boy's lips trembled. His voice barely made it out. "I don't want to die." No one reacted to him. Not the crowd. Not the traders. Not the guards. The Alpha King's hand tightened slightly inside his cloak, but his face remained unreadable. He had seen fear before. He had seen cruelty before. What he had not expected was how ordinary it felt here. Like this was just another day. And then she appeared. It was not dramatic. There was no announcement, no sudden silence in the crowd, no signal that something important had entered the space. She simply walked into view, moving through the edge of the arena like she had already made a decision before anyone noticed her. The female lead. She didn't look like someone who belonged in a place like this. No armor. No weapon that stood out. Just simple, worn clothing that looked like it had survived too many difficult days. Her hair was damp from the rain, but she didn't seem bothered by it. What stood out most was not her appearance, but her stillness. She didn't hesitate. She didn't scan the crowd nervously. She walked directly toward the center. The traders noticed her almost immediately. One of them laughed. "And who is this supposed to be?" Another spat into the mud. "Wrong place, woman. Step back before you get caught in something you don't understand." But she didn't stop. Her eyes were locked on the boy. The boy noticed her too. Confusion flickered across his face, like he couldn't understand why someone would walk toward him instead of away. She stopped just a few steps away from him, close enough that the chains on his wrists trembled slightly when he moved. "You're not using him," she said quietly. The words were not loud, but they carried strangely in the open space. The crowd didn't react immediately. It took a moment for the meaning to settle. A trader laughed again, louder this time. "You think you can stop this?" She didn't answer. That silence felt heavier than any threat. From the shadows, the Alpha King observed her more carefully now. She was not afraid. Not in the way most people were. There was fear in her body. He could see it in the slight tension of her shoulders, the way her breath moved, but it was controlled, held back, contained like something she refused to let rule her. That kind of control was rare. The boy shifted behind her slightly, instinctively moving closer to her back as if her presence had become the only barrier between him and the world. Then it happened. A deep metallic groan echoed from the far side of the arena. Cage. Something inside it moved. The crowd's energy changed instantly. Excitement, anticipation, cruelty. Everything sharpened at once. The traders stepped back from the edge, smiling like they were about to watch something entertaining. The Alpha King's attention narrowed. This was the beast mentioned in reports. Unstable, untrained, used illegally in underground fights. The cage lock was released. A heavy silence followed, and then the beast came out. Did not walk. It stepped like something that had forgotten what restraint meant. Its body was massive, soaked in mud and rain, muscles tense like cords ready to snap. Its eyes burned with an aggression that didn't feel natural. Not fully animal. Not fully controlled either. Something in between, like it had been pushed too far into violence and never pulled back. The crowd reacted instantly. Some stepped forward. Others leaned back. A few shouted for it to begin. But the beast did not rush forward immediately. Pause. Just for a moment. That pause should not have existed. The Alpha King noticed it immediately. His gaze sharpened. Beasts like this did not hesitate. They did not think. They did not pause in the presence of prey. But this one did. Its eyes moved. Not across the crowd. Not toward the boy. Toward her. The female lead. She didn't move away. Instead, she lowered her stance slightly, grounding her feet deeper into the mud. Her breathing slowed, almost matching the rhythm of the rain around them. And then something even stranger happened. The beast stepped forward. Slowly. Not attacking. Just watching her. The boy behind her made a small sound of panic, but she reached back gently without looking away from the beast and guided him further behind her body. "Stay behind me," she said softly. Her voice didn't shake. The beast tilted its head slightly. The Alpha King's eyes narrowed further. Something was wrong. Or something was very right in a way no one understood yet. The beast took another step. Then another. But instead of charging forward, it began to circle. Slowly. Carefully. As if it was trying to understand something it had lost. The crowd's excitement faded into confusion. Traders exchanged uneasy glances. One of them muttered that something was wrong with the creature. But the Alpha King wasn't looking at them. He was watching her. Because she hadn't changed her stance. Not once. Even as the beast circled closer, even as the danger increased, she remained steady. Not challenging it. Not provoking it. Just present. And in that presence, something inside the beast was not acting like a monster anymore. It was reacting like something being remembered. The Alpha King stepped forward slightly from the shadows without realizing it. Just a small movement. But enough to show that even he was no longer just observing. Something about this moment was pulling him in. And he didn't yet understand why. The beast stopped circling. Stood still. Mud dripping from its body. Breathing heavy. Eyes locked on her. And for the first time since it had entered the arena, did not attack. It waited. As if the next moment depended on what she would choose to become. And in that silence between them, something invisible began to shift. Not loudly, not clearly, but deeply enough that even the Alpha King felt it in his chest before he could name it. Something had already begun. And none of them would be the same after it moved again. The moment the beast stepped fully into the mud, the entire arena changed its rhythm. It wasn't just silence anymore. It was anticipation stretched too tight, like something inside the crowd was holding its breath without realizing it. The rain kept falling, but even that sound felt distant now, as if the world had narrowed into a single circle of wet earth, iron bars, and uneasy lives. The beast stood there, massive and unmoving for a heartbeat longer than it should have. Its body was drenched, muscles tense beneath its fur, every breath pushing out like it was dragging something heavy from inside itself. Its eyes were locked forward, but not in the way predators usually lock onto prey. It was different. It wasn't hunting. It was waiting. And that alone made the traders uncomfortable. A man near the outer ring scoffed loudly, trying to break the tension. "Stop staring and let it move already," he shouted. But even his voice sounded unsure. The Alpha King, hidden among the shadows of the crowd, narrowed his gaze slightly. His presence remained controlled, unreadable, but his attention had sharpened completely. This was not the behavior he expected from a beast like this. The reports described violence on sight, uncontrollable aggression, a creature that lost itself the moment the cage opened. Yet here it was, breathing, touching. And then his eyes shifted. To her. The female lead had not moved from her position, not even a step. She still stood between the boy and the beast, her body slightly angled, as if she had already accepted the space she was taking up. The boy behind her clutched at the back of her clothes, his small fingers trembling, but she did not look back at him. Her focus stayed forward. On the beast. Her breathing had changed now. Not fast. Not panic. Controlled. Measured. As if she was matching something only she could feel. The Alpha King noticed that too. She wasn't reacting like a victim. She wasn't reacting like a fighter. She was reacting like something familiar was standing in front of her. The beast took a slow step forward. Mud shifted under its weight. Another step followed. And then something strange happened. It stopped again. Not because of hesitation this time, but because something about her presence had tightened the air between them. The crowd began to murmur. "That thing should have attacked already. It's broken. Or it's been starved too long." But none of those explanations felt right. The female lead slowly adjusted her footing, shifting her weight slightly deeper into the mud. It was subtle, almost unnoticeable, but the Alpha King caught it instantly. She was grounding herself, not preparing to run, not preparing to fight, preparing to stay. The beast's head tilted slightly. A low sound rumbled in its chest, not quite a growl, not quite confusion, something in between. The boy behind her whispered again, barely audible, "Don't let it see me." She finally spoke to him without turning back. "It's not looking at you," she said softly. The words didn't match the situation. Not logically. Not for anyone watching. But something in her tone made the boy believe her. The Alpha King's eyes narrowed slightly. 'Cause she was right. The beast wasn't looking at the boy. It hadn't been since it entered. It was focused entirely on her. The traders started to shift uneasily now. One of them stepped closer to the edge of the arena. "Move it," he snapped at the beast, as if his voice alone could force obedience. "Attack already." But the beast didn't respond. Took another step. Then another. And then it did something that changed the energy completely. Circled. Slowly. Not charging. Not attacking. Circling her. The crowd reacted instantly. Confusion spread like wildfire. Why is it circling her? Is it playing with her? That's not normal behavior. The Alpha King felt something tighten inside him as he watched the movement. He had seen beasts in countless conditions. Trained, untrained, enraged, starving. None of them behaved like this. Circling meant assessment. But this wasn't assessment for prey. It felt closer to recognition. The female lead didn't follow the beast with her eyes as it moved. She kept her gaze steady, forward, as if she trusted that looking away would break something fragile between them. Her hand shifted slightly behind her, guiding the boy a step further back without breaking her focus. The boy stumbled slightly in the mud but stayed behind her. The beast completed half a circle, then slowed. Its breathing deepened. The Alpha King noticed something else now. The beast wasn't just circling her body. It was circling her presence, as if trying to understand something it couldn't remember clearly. The crowd noise started to rise again, uncertainty turning into discomfort. One of the traders yelled, "End this! It's malfunctioning." But no one stepped in. Not yet. Because something about the scene had turned unpredictable in a way that even they couldn't control anymore. The female lead finally moved her hand slightly forward. Not aggressively, not inviting, just open. Small gesture. A stillness that wasn't submission, but something closer to calm acknowledgement. The beast slowed instantly. That reaction was immediate. The Alpha King saw it clearly. The moment her hand moved, the beast's entire body shifted. Not in attack, in response. As if something inside it had been triggered by recognition rather than threat. The traders went silent for a brief moment. Even the rain seemed louder. The beast took one step closer, then stopped again. Now it was closer than before. Close enough that the crowd could feel the weight of it. Close enough that the boy behind her let out a small, shaky breath and pressed closer into her back. But she still didn't turn. She didn't look afraid. Not once. And that unsettled the Alpha King more than anything else. Because fear was predictable. Fear made sense. But this calm didn't. The beast lowered its head slightly. Not fully. Not submissively. But enough that the Alpha King felt a shift in meaning. Something had changed in its behavior. It was no longer just reacting to instinct. It was reacting to something deeper. Something older. The female lead finally spoke again. Her voice was low, almost lost in the rain. "Don't come closer if you're going to hurt him." The words were not aimed at the beast like a command. They were spoken like a boundary. Truth. The beast stopped moving completely. And for a moment everything held. No one in the crowd spoke. No one shouted. Even the traders looked unsure of what they were witnessing. The Alpha King stepped slightly forward again, just enough to get a clearer view. Because now he understood something unsettling. This was not a simple beast reaction. This was interaction. The beast tilted its head again, and then took a step back. The movement was small, but it changed everything. The crowd reacted instantly. What did it just do? Did it step back? That thing doesn't retreat. But it had. The beast had not attacked. It had not reacted violently. It had stepped back. As if her presence had rewritten its instinct for a moment. The female lead exhaled slowly, almost silently. Not relief. Not fear. Just acknowledgement that something fragile had held for one more second. The boy behind her whispered again. "It didn't hurt me." She nodded slightly. "I know." The Alpha King felt it then. A shift he couldn't ignore anymore. Something about her was not normal in this environment. Not in a supernatural sense. Not yet. But in a way that disturbed the natural order of reactions. Even beasts that had lost control were reacting differently around her. The traders grew restless. One of them shouted, "This is wrong. It's been tampered with." But even as he spoke, his voice lacked conviction. 'Cause everyone could see it now. The beast was not behaving like a weapon. It was behaving like something confused. Something remembering. The Alpha King's eyes stayed locked on the female lead. Because she was the only constant in all of it. The beast circled no more. It stood still again, facing her directly. And in that moment, the silence between them became heavier than the rain. Heavier than the crowd. Heavier than the entire arena. Because something unseen had formed in that stillness. Not a bond yet. Not a truth yet. But the beginning of something that would not stay hidden for long. And the Alpha King, watching from the shadows, felt the first undeniable thought form in his mind. This was not an accident. This was recognition. The moment the beast finally stopped circling, the tension in the arena did not disappear. Changed shape. Like a wound that stopped bleeding but still hurt when touched. Rain continued to fall, softer now, but it only made the silence heavier. The mud beneath everyone's feet had turned darker, thicker, as if it was absorbing not just water, but everything unspoken in the air. The female lead remained still for a few seconds longer, her eyes fixed on the beast that now stood facing her. It wasn't attacking. It wasn't retreating anymore either. It simply existed there, watching, breathing, as if something inside it had been paused and never fully restarted. Behind her, the boy trembled. Not from the cold this time. From confusion. Because nothing about what just happened matched what he had been taught to expect. Beasts did not stop. Beasts did not hesitate. Beasts did not look at people like that. The traders, however, were no longer amused. Their laughter had disappeared completely. Now there were only whispers. Uneasy ones. This is not normal. It should have attacked already. Something is wrong with it. One of them spat into the mud. Or something is wrong with her. That word, her, landed heavier than the rest. The female lead heard it. But she didn't react. Not yet. The Alpha King, still hidden in the shadowed edge of the crowd, narrowed his gaze slightly. The situation had shifted again, but not in a direction he could predict. He had come expecting brutality, corruption, confirmation of illegal activity. What he was witnessing instead felt layered. Like something beneath the surface was slowly revealing itself. And she was at the center of it. The female lead finally shifted her stance, just slightly, as if acknowledging that the immediate danger had paused. She didn't relax. Not fully. But her body stopped bracing for impact. That small change was enough for the boy to breathe a little more steadily. He tugged her sleeve gently. Is it gone? She looked down at him for the first time since this began. Her expression softened just barely. No, she said quietly. It's still here. But she didn't sound afraid when she said it. She sounded aware. And that difference mattered more than fear. The beast, a few steps away, lowered its head slightly again. Not fully. Not submissively. Just enough that it wasn't standing as aggressively as before. The Alpha King noticed everything. The way its breathing had slowed. The way its aggression had not escalated. The way it was no longer reacting to the crowd. Only to her. And that was the problem. Because beasts did not choose focus like this without reason. Something had altered its instinct. Or awakened something buried inside it. A trader near the front finally snapped. Enough of this, he shouted. End the delay. He stepped forward, grabbing a metal whip from his belt. The sound of it sliding out cut through the air sharply. The female lead's eyes flicked toward him for the first time. Still calm. But now sharper. Don't, she said simply. It wasn't loud. But it stopped him for half a second. Not because of authority, but because of something else. Something in her tone suggested she wasn't guessing. She was warning. The trader scoffed and raised the whip anyway. You think you can stand there and... He never finished the sentence. The beast moved. Not forward. Not toward her. Toward him. The movement was instant. The crowd erupted in shock as the massive creature lunged just one step forward, mud exploding under its weight. The trader froze mid-motion, whip still raised, suddenly realizing the attention had shifted. But again, the beast stopped, just short, close enough to intimidate, not close enough to strike. And that was worse, because now it wasn't uncontrolled violence. It was controlled response. The Alpha King's eyes sharpened further. This is not instinct alone, he thought. This is direction. The trader backed away quickly, suddenly unsure of his own authority. This is broken, he muttered. The beast is broken. But even he didn't believe it anymore. The female lead didn't move during the entire exchange. She didn't need to. Because somehow, without speaking, she had become the center of stability in a place built entirely on chaos. And that realization began to shift something deeper in the crowd. Whispers changed tone. From amusement, to discomfort, to suspicion, and then to fear. Not of the beast, of her. The boy tugged her again, more urgently now. "There are more," he whispered. "Not just me, others." That sentence changed everything inside her expression. It didn't show anger immediately. It showed understanding. Slow, heavy understanding. She turned slightly, not away from the beast, but enough to glance toward where the trader tents stood beyond the arena edge. Dark structures. Iron cages barely visible behind them. And now that she looked closely, she saw movement. Subtle. Too subtle to be accidental. Her eyes narrowed. The Alpha King noticed the shift in her attention instantly. Something had clicked. Pattern forming. The beast was not the only unnatural thing here. The boy stepped closer behind her, voice trembling again. "They keep us there, at night when no one is watching." Her jaw tightened slightly. Not outward rage. Contained reaction. The kind of emotion held so tightly it becomes something else entirely. From the edge of the arena, one of the traders noticed her stare. He followed it, and immediately became alert. A sharp whistle sounded. 2 guards shifted position near the cages. That was enough confirmation. The female lead had seen something she wasn't supposed to. The Alpha King noticed the shift in security instantly. He adjusted his stance slightly within the crowd, still hidden, but now fully alert. This was no longer just about the beast. This was infrastructure, system, a network operating beneath the surface of the border. And the girl standing in the mud had just stepped directly into its blind spot. One of the traders walked toward her now, slow, deliberate. "Step away from the boy," he said firmly. His tone had changed. Less mocking, more controlled. Like someone trying to regain authority before it slipped entirely. She didn't move. The boy clutched her sleeve harder. The trader's eyes narrowed. "I said move." Still nothing. A guard behind him shifted his hand toward his weapon. The Alpha King's attention sharpened further. He was ready now. Not because chaos had begun, but because it was about to. And then something unexpected happened. The female lead raised her hand slightly. Not in surrender. Not in aggression. Just a small, steady motion. And she spoke. Clear. "I know what you're doing." The trader froze. Just for a second. But it was enough. Because that sentence wasn't fear. It wasn't confusion. It was recognition. The crowd around them shifted uneasily. The Alpha King felt the weight of those words immediately. She wasn't guessing. She was confirming. The trader forced a laugh. "You know nothing." But his voice had lost strength. She looked at him now fully. And for the first time there was something sharper in her calm. Not anger that exploded. But anger that settled. Controlled. Dangerous in its stillness. "I know there are children behind those cages," she said softly. Silence dropped instantly. Even the rain seemed quieter for a moment. The boy behind her stiffened, as if hearing it spoken out loud made it more real. The trader's face changed. Just slightly. But enough. And that was all she needed. The truth had already been confirmed. From the shadows, the Alpha King's expression darkened slightly. So the reports were correct. But seeing it like this, hearing it through her voice, made it sharper than any intelligence briefing ever could. The trader tried to recover. "This is not your concern," he snapped. But the female lead stepped forward 1/2 step. That was all. Just 1 step. And the entire energy shifted again. The beast behind her growled softly, but not at her. The situation. The tension. The imbalance. And now even the traders realized something uncomfortable. They were losing control of the narrative. Not through force, but through awareness. The female lead looked briefly at the boy again, then back at the cages. And when she spoke next, her voice was quieter, but final. "How many?" The question wasn't for one person. It was for the system. The trader didn't answer immediately, because answering meant admitting it, and admitting it meant exposure. The silence stretched, heavy. The Alpha King watched everything now with a different understanding. This was no longer a random confrontation. This was exposure of a hidden operation. And she had stepped directly into its center without hesitation. The boy whispered again, barely audible. "There are more like me." That sentence didn't break her, but it changed her. Not emotionally, structurally. Something inside her decision-making had shifted from protection. Purpose. The trader finally spoke again, voice lower now. "You should leave." But it didn't sound like a warning anymore. It sounded like panic trying to disguise itself as control. The female lead didn't answer. Instead, she turned her head slightly toward the beast again. And for a moment, the beast was still watching her. Not the crowd. Not the traders. And in that shared stillness, something unspoken passed between them. Not understanding. Not trust. Something older. Something instinctive. The Alpha King felt it again. That same unfamiliar pull in the atmosphere. The sense that something long buried had begun to respond to her presence. And for the first time since entering this territory, he realized the real danger was not the beast. It was what the truth she just uncovered would force everyone to become. And none of them were ready for what came next. The tension that followed her words did not fade. It hardened. Like the air itself had turned into something sharper. Something no longer safe to breathe freely. Rain continued falling over the arena, but now it felt distant, almost irrelevant. The crowd no longer reacted to the weather, or the mud, or even the beast standing unnaturally still behind the female lead. All attention had shifted to something far more dangerous than physical violence. Awareness. Truth spoken aloud in a place built on silence. The traders were the first to move. Not quickly, carefully. Like men trying to pretend they still controlled the situation even after realizing they might not. The female lead stood exactly where she was. Between the boy and everything else. Her posture had not changed since the moment she stepped into the arena. But now there was something different in her stillness. It was no longer just protection. It was defiance. The boy clung to her sleeve tighter. His breathing uneven again. "They're angry," he whispered. She didn't look at him immediately. Her eyes stayed on the trader who had spoken last. "I know," she said quietly. The Alpha King, still hidden among the crowd, observed the shift carefully. This was no longer an isolated incident. This was becoming confrontation. And the moment that realization settled in, the structure of the crowd began to change. Guards shifted positions. Traders moved closer together. Whispers turned into low commands. And somewhere beyond the arena, chains clinked again. Not from the beast. From preparation. The female lead noticed it too. She didn't react outwardly, but her attention tracked the movement of the guards toward the cages near the tents. Confirmation. They were trying to regain control. Silently. Before the situation could spread. One of the traders raised his hand. Signal. And the guards responded immediately. Two of them began moving toward the female lead. Not rushing. Not attacking. Just approaching. Controlled escalation. The Alpha King's gaze narrowed beneath his hood. This was the point where most situations like this turn violent. Not because violence was necessary, but because control was slipping. The female lead noticed them approaching. She shifted her stance slightly, placing her body more firmly between the boy and the advancing guards. Still no panic. Still no retreat. But now readiness. The beast behind her let out a low, uneasy sound. Not a roar. Not aggression. Something closer to tension. As if it understood the direction things were heading. The first guard stopped a few steps away. "You need to step aside," he said flatly. His voice was practiced. Not emotional. Not angry. Just procedural. The second guard stayed slightly behind him, hand near his weapon. The female lead looked at them without moving. "No," she said simply. One word. No explanation. No negotiation. The guard exhaled slowly, as if annoyed rather than threatened. This is not your matter. Step away from the boy. Behind her, the boy shook his head quickly. No, don't leave me. She placed a hand gently on his shoulder without looking back. I'm not leaving, she said. The guard's expression tightened. The trader from earlier stepped forward behind them. This is interference, he said loudly, trying to reassert control over the watching crowd. She is disrupting regulated proceedings. The word regulated sounded almost laughable in this place, but he said it anyway. The crowd shifted uneasily. Some still didn't fully understand what was happening. Others were beginning to understand too much. The Alpha King stepped slightly forward in the shadows again. Closer now. Because the situation was reaching a threshold. One wrong move and everything would collapse into chaos. And yet, he found himself watching her more than the guards. Because she had not changed her expression once. Even now. Even with armed men approaching. Even with a beast behind her that did not behave like anything recorded in reports. She was still calm. And that calm was starting to affect everything around her. The first guard took another step forward. Last warning. The female lead finally moved her eyes slightly toward him. Not fear. Not defiance. Assessment. Then she said something unexpected. You don't want to do this. The guard hesitated. Just a fraction. Not because of authority, but because of tone. She wasn't challenging him. She was stating something like fact. The second guard shifted slightly behind him. Uncomfortable. The trader snapped sharply. Remove her. That broke the hesitation. The first guard stepped forward. And in that instant, the beast behind her moved. Not attacking, but reacting. A single step forward. Heavy. Controlled. Enough that the mud shook. The guards froze immediately. The Alpha King's attention sharpened instantly. Because the beast had not moved for the guards. It had moved in alignment with her position. Like an extension of her boundary. Not obedience. Connection. The crowd reacted instantly. Whispers. Fear rising again. The trader's confidence cracked slightly. This is exactly why it must be contained, he said louder, but now there was strain in his voice. The female lead didn't turn to the beast. She didn't need to. She simply said softly, "Stay." And the beast stopped. Immediately. The silence that followed was heavier than anything before. Even the guards looked unsettled now. The Alpha King felt it more clearly than anyone else. This was not training. This was not conditioning. This was response without command. A deeper form of alignment. And it centered entirely on her. The first guard tightened his grip on his weapon. This is getting out of control, he muttered. The trader pointed aggressively now. She is the problem. Take her now. That was the shift. The moment words became order. And order became action. The guards moved. At the same time. The Alpha King's body shifted instinctively in the crowd. Not yet revealing himself, but preparing. Because now it was no longer about observation. It was about preventing collapse. The first guard reached out to grab her arm. And the moment his hand came within inches, she moved. Not violently. Not fast in a way meant to harm. Just precise. She stepped half a pace back, rotating her body slightly so the boy was fully behind her and out of reach. The guard's hand missed. But the message was clear. She would not allow contact. The second guard reacted immediately, stepping in to block her movement. Stop resisting, he ordered. Her eyes stayed steady. I'm not resisting, she said. Then she added quietly. I'm protecting. That word changed something again. Because it reframed everything. The boy, hearing it, clung tighter to her back. The beast behind her shifted again, just slightly. A low sound in its chest. Uncomfortable. Agitated. The Alpha King noticed it. The beast was not reacting to threat alone anymore. It was reacting to her emotional state. That realization tightened something in his chest. Because if that was true, then the connection was deeper than instinct. The trader stepped closer now, losing patience. Enough of this spectacle, he snapped. Take her. Secure the boy. Reset the arena. That was the final attempt to restore structure. But structure had already started collapsing. The guards moved again. And this time, the female lead looked past them. Not at them, but toward the cages in the distance, where the children were held. Her expression changed slightly. Not fear. Not anger. Decision. And in that moment, the Alpha King understood something important. She was no longer reacting to immediate threat. She was preparing to act on something larger. The guard reached again, and she spoke one last time. Quiet. Clear. You're on the wrong side of this. Then everything stopped, not because they listened, but because the beast behind her let out a deeper sound. Not a roar. Not aggression. A warning. The kind that made even the guards hesitate for a fraction of a second. That fraction was enough. The Alpha King stepped forward from the shadows. Low. Deliberate. His presence cutting through the tension instantly. The crowd noticed immediately. The guards froze. The trader turned slightly, confused by the sudden shift in pressure. 'Cause now, the situation had changed again. Not from chaos, but from authority entering the space. And for the first time since the arena began, someone other than her had control over the silence. The moment the guards hesitated, the silence that followed felt unnatural. Not peaceful. Not safe. Just suspended. Like the entire arena had been caught between two decisions and didn't yet know which one would break first. Rain continued falling, but softer now. It slid down iron poles, dripped from torn banners, and disappeared into the mud without sound. The beast behind the female lead remained still, but not relaxed. Its presence was heavy, watchful, as if it no longer belonged to the arena, but to her space around it. And for the first time since the cage opened, nothing was actively trying to attack. The Alpha King stepped forward from the shadows. Not fast. Not dramatic. Just enough that the edge of the crowd noticed first, then the guards, then the traders. His presence changed the air immediately. It wasn't loud authority. It was quiet certainty. The kind that didn't need to announce itself to be understood. The guards lowered their weapons slightly without realizing it. Not fully. Not yet. But enough to show hesitation had turned into recognition of something above their control. The trader frowned sharply. "Who are you?" he demanded. But his voice lacked confidence now. The Alpha King didn't answer him. His attention was not on the trader. It was on her. The female lead stood exactly where she had been since the beginning, between the boy and everything else. Her posture hadn't changed, but her awareness had. She had noticed him the moment he stepped forward. Not fearfully, not submissively, just observantly, like she was trying to understand what kind of danger he represented. The boy behind her whispered again, quieter now. "They are more afraid of him." She didn't look back at the boy immediately. Instead she said softly, "Stay close." The Alpha King took another step forward. And the beast behind her shifted slightly. Not aggression. Response. The Alpha King noticed it instantly. The beast was still reacting to her, not the crowd. But now it was also reacting to him. Like something in its awareness was torn between two signals. The traders began to murmur again, unsettled by the shift in power. This wasn't part of the report. Who is that man? Why is everything stopping when he moves? The Alpha King finally spoke. His voice was calm. Not raised. Not emotional. But absolute. Enough. One word. And it carried weight across the entire arena. The guards froze completely this time. Not from fear alone. From recognition of authority that didn't require explanation. The trader tried to recover quickly. "This is an unauthorized interference with regulated border proceedings," he said loudly, trying to sound composed. But even he stepped half a step back as he spoke. The Alpha King finally turned his gaze toward him. Just slightly. And that alone was enough to silence the traitor mid-breath. For a moment no one spoke. Only rain. Only mud. Only breath. The female lead finally shifted her stance slightly, not away from the boy, but adjusting so she could see both the Alpha King and the guards at the same time. Her eyes narrowed just a fraction. Not hostility. Assessment. The Alpha King noticed that immediately. She wasn't reacting like someone overwhelmed by power. She was evaluating it. That alone made something inside him tighten slightly. Because most people didn't evaluate him. They reacted to him. The boy tugged her sleeve gently. "Is he good or bad?" he whispered. She didn't answer immediately. That silence meant more than any guess. Because she didn't know yet. And she refused to pretend she did. Finally she said softly, "I don't think he's here for them." The Alpha King heard that. Even from distance. Even in noise. And something about it registered differently than expected. Not praise. Not fear. Just observation. The beast behind her exhaled deeply. Almost like it was settling into a new pattern of tension. It did not move forward again, but it also did not withdraw. The Alpha King shifted his attention slightly toward the cages in the distance. His eyes narrowed. He had come for confirmation. But what he was seeing now was more than that. This wasn't just illegal activity. It was structure. Organized. Sustained. Protected. The traitor, realizing the attention was shifting away from control, tried again. "These accusations are baseless," he said quickly. "This woman is disturbing order. The beast is unstable because of her presence." The female lead finally spoke again. "That's not true." Just 2 words. But they cut through the traitor's argument immediately. The Alpha King glanced at her again. The boy behind her peeked slightly around her back, watching everything with wide eyes. The guards no longer moved. They waited. Not for orders. But for direction. And that shift was the most dangerous of all. Because it meant authority was no longer clear. The Alpha King took another step closer to the arena edge. Now fully visible to the inner circle. The traitor's expression changed slightly when he got a clearer look. Recognition. Confusion. Then unease. "You're not from here," the traitor said cautiously. The Alpha King didn't respond. Instead he looked past him. The cages. The children. At the truth that was no longer hidden. The female lead noticed his gaze shift. So did the boy. And something in her expression tightened slightly. Not fear. But understanding. This was no longer just a confrontation. It was exposure. The Alpha King finally spoke again. "This ends now. No explanation. No negotiation. Just declaration." The guards looked at each other. Unsure whether to obey the traitor or the man in front of them. That uncertainty was enough to fracture control completely. The traitor stepped forward again, louder now. "You have no jurisdiction here." But he stopped mid-sentence. Because the Alpha King finally turned fully toward him. And the silence that followed was immediate. Heavy. Absolute. The traitor's voice died before it could finish forming. The female lead watched carefully. Still not moving. Still protecting the boy. But now something else had changed in her focus. The Alpha King wasn't just authority. He was intent. And that intent was not directed at her. It was directed at ending everything she had just uncovered. The beast behind her shifted slightly again. Not aggression. Readiness. As if it understood that the direction of the situation had finally become clear. The Alpha King lifted his hand slightly. Not as a threat. But as signal. And from the edge of the arena, unseen movement began to shift among his hidden forces. The traitors noticed too late. The female lead noticed earlier. Her eyes narrowed slightly. "So it was planned," she said softly. "Not accusation. Recognition." The Alpha King didn't respond. Because in that moment, speaking was unnecessary. The truth was already in motion. The boy held onto her sleeve tighter. The female lead adjusted her stance one final time. Still between him and everything else. but now aware that everything else was expanding beyond what she had first understood. And in the center of all of it, the Alpha King stood watching her, not as a witness anymore, but as someone who had just stepped fully into the same conflict she had already entered alone. The transition from the border arena to the council hall felt like stepping into a different world entirely. Not because the land changed, but because silence changed. In the arena, silence was unstable, always waiting to break. Here silence was controlled, intentional. The council hall was carved from old stone deep within the territory walls. Tall pillars rose like frozen judgment, and cold light slipped through narrow openings in the ceiling, falling in thin lines across the floor. There was no rain here, but the memory of it lingered like something unwelcome that had followed them inside. The Alpha King stood at the center of the hall. No cloak now, no disguise, just him. And that alone shifted the atmosphere more than any spoken announcement. Around him sat the council, elders, commanders, political advisors, men and women who had built their authority on distance, on law, on tradition that rarely bent for emotion. But today, something had entered their space that did not belong to any of those categories. Truth. And beside that truth stood the female lead. She had not been formally introduced. She had not been acknowledged. She simply existed there, as if presence was enough. The boy was not with her here. He had been taken to a safe shelter outside the hall. But his absence did not weaken her stance. If anything, it sharpened it. The Alpha King spoke first. His voice carried through the hall without effort. Border reports were accurate, he said. Illegal trafficking is active beyond containment zones. Children are being moved through controlled trade routes under our oversight. A slight shift moved through the council. Not surprise. Discomfort. One of the elders leaned forward slightly. Reports are not proof, he said calmly. Borders have always had irregularities. That is not reason for disruption of established order. The Alpha King's gaze stayed steady. I saw it, he said. That changed the tone slightly. Because reports could be dismissed. Witness truth was harder. But the council was trained for this. Another voice followed immediately. Even if that is true, another council member said, direct intervention could destabilize territorial agreements. We maintain balance through controlled tolerance. The female lead's expression shifted slightly at that phrase. Controlled tolerance. As if suffering had rules. As if silence was policy. The Alpha King noticed her reaction. But he didn't comment yet. The council continued. This is not your first time acting impulsively, an elder said, looking directly at him now. We cannot allow personal interference to override structured governance. The word personal was intentional. A subtle attempt to shift the conversation away from morality and into control. The Alpha King understood that. But he didn't respond immediately. Because at that moment, the doors at the side of the hall opened. And the female lead was brought forward into full view of the council. Not as a guest. Not as a witness. As a variable. A disturbance that had followed him from the border. She walked without hesitation. No chains. No restraint. But also no recognition. The council members turned their attention to her immediately. Whispers began almost instantly. She is the one from the border. The one seen near the beast incident. Why is she here? The Alpha King did not look at the council anymore. He looked at her. Because her reaction mattered more. She stopped at the center of the hall. And she did not bow. Not out of disrespect. But because nothing about her body language suggested she understood the need for it. That alone made the room tense. One of the council members spoke sharply. This is not a place for civilians. Another added. She is interfering with territory matters. The female lead finally spoke. I didn't come here, she said. I was brought. Silence followed. Simple truth stated plainly. The Alpha King noticed something important. She did not defend herself beyond truth. She did not over-explain. She did not perform emotion. The council, however, did not care for simplicity. "This situation is already being handled," an elder said. "There is no need for outside influence." The Alpha King finally turned slightly toward them. "This is not outside influence," he said. "This is what you have been avoiding." The room tightened again. The female lead remained still, but her eyes shifted slightly between the council members. Observing, understanding, not reacting. One of the elders leaned back slightly. "And what exactly do you propose?" he asked. "Military disruption. Border escalation. Panic based on isolated incidents." The Alpha King paused, then said clearly, "Justice." The word landed heavier than expected, not because it was dramatic, but because it was absolute. The council reacted immediately. "That is not a policy," one of them said sharply. "That is emotion." The Alpha King's expression did not change. "Then your policy is failure," he replied. A ripple of tension moved through the hall. But the council was not easily shaken. They shifted focus again. Back to control. Back to containment. And then one of them spoke again, looking directly at the female lead. "She is a distraction," he said. "Bringing her here only confirms instability in your judgment." That was the pivot. The female lead noticed it immediately. The attempt to isolate her. To reduce her to a factor of disruption rather than truth. The Alpha King noticed it too. But before he could respond, she spoke. Not loudly, but clearly. "I am not here to be anything," she said. "I am here because people are being taken." Silence again. But different this time. Because it wasn't emotional. It was factual. The council members exchanged glances. One of them finally said, "Even if what you say is true, intervention without protocol." She interrupted gently. "How many protocols does it take to justify silence?" That question didn't echo. Settled. The Alpha King looked at her slightly differently after that. Because she had done something even the council rarely encountered. She reframed authority without challenging it directly. The council shifted again, now more uncomfortable. "She is not trained in governance," one elder said. "She does not understand consequences." The female lead replied softly, "I understand children being locked in cages." That line hit differently. Even in a room built to resist emotion. The Alpha King felt the shift in pressure around him. Because now the council was not debating policy. They were defending distance. The council leader finally turned toward the Alpha King again. "This is exactly why she cannot remain in this territory," he said. "She destabilizes structure." Silence followed. The room waited. And for the first time since the beginning of the meeting, the Alpha King hesitated. Not visibly, not openly, but internally. Because removing her would restore structure. But acknowledging her would change it. His gaze moved briefly to her again. She was still standing, still calm, still unchanged by the entire hall of authority pressing against her presence. And in that stillness, he saw something he did not expect. Not defiance, not rebellion, clarity. The council waited for his decision. The pressure in the room tightened. And then the Alpha King spoke. "I will not remove her." That sentence changed the entire balance instantly. Whispers erupted immediately. "That is against protocol. This is interference from personal bias. You are jeopardizing stability." But the Alpha King did not look at them. He looked at her. And for a brief moment, something unspoken passed between them. Not connection yet, but recognition of shared weight. The female lead did not react outwardly. But something in her gaze softened slightly. Not relief, understanding. The council leader stood slightly. "This decision has consequences." The Alpha King replied simply. "So does ignoring truth." Silence fell again. But this time it felt irreversible. The council had not been defeated. But it had been challenged in a way it could not easily contain. The female lead remained at the center of the hall. And for the first time since entering this world, she was no longer being treated as an outsider alone. She was now part of the conflict itself. Not because she demanded it, but because truth had pulled her into it. And as the Alpha King stood beside that truth in front of the council that shaped his world, something deeper than authority began to shift quietly beneath everything. Something that would not remain silent for long. The Borderlands looked different after the council meeting. Not because the land had changed, but because perception had. The same mud stretched across the open fields. The same broken fences marked the forgotten boundary lines. The same rain-heavy air lingered in the distance like a memory refusing to leave. But now everything felt like it was waiting. Waiting for something to happen that could no longer be delayed. The female lead stood near the edge of the settlement, where the land dipped slightly into a shallow basin surrounded by scattered stones. The orphan boy stayed close to her side, holding her hand tightly, as if letting go might make the world become dangerous again. The beast was there too. Not chained, not controlled, just present. And that alone was enough to make the air feel unstable. It stood at a distance first. Watching. Its body was tense, but not in the way of aggression. It was something else now. Something quieter. Something uncertain. The Alpha King stood farther back, partially concealed by the remains of a collapsed structure. He did not interfere. He did not move closer. Because what was unfolding now was not something that responded to authority. It responded to something older. Instinct. Memory. Recognition. The female lead noticed the beast's gaze immediately. She did not step forward. She did not step back. She simply held her ground. The boy shifted slightly closer behind her. "It came back," he whispered. She nodded gently. "It didn't leave," she said. The beast took one slow step forward, then stopped again. Mud shifted under its weight. The sound was small, but it felt loud in the silence. The Alpha King's eyes narrowed slightly. This movement was not random. It was controlled hesitation. As if the beast was approaching something it was not fully certain it had permission to acknowledge. The female lead slowly knelt slightly so she was closer to the boy's level. "Stay behind me," she said softly. But her eyes never left the beast. The boy obeyed immediately, pressing closer behind her. The beast took another step. Then another. Closer now. But still not aggressive. Still not wild. Just careful. The Alpha King noticed something shift in its breathing. It was slower now. Measured. As if the presence in front of it was not triggering survival instinct anymore. But something deeper. Recognition. The female lead stood again slowly. And when she did, the beast stopped completely. The distance between them now was shorter than before. But the tension was not increasing. It was transforming. The Alpha King felt it again. That same unfamiliar pressure in the air. The sense that something ancient was responding without words. The beast lowered its head slightly. Not fully. Not submissively. Just enough to change its posture from confrontation to acknowledgement. The crowd that had gathered at a distance remained silent. No one dared interrupt this moment. Even the wind felt careful. The female lead finally moved one hand slightly forward. Not reaching. Not commanding. Just open. The beast reacted instantly. Its head tilted slightly. A low sound escaped its chest. Not a growl, not a warning. Something softer. Uncertain. The Alpha King felt his attention sharpen fully now. This was no longer about control or instability. This was interaction. The beast took another step forward. Slowly. Carefully. Then stopped again. Now it was closer. Close enough that the boy behind her held his breath without realizing it. But the female lead did not change her expression. There was no fear in her face now. Only awareness. The beast exhaled deeply. And lowered itself further. Not fully lying down. But enough that its posture was no longer threatening. The Alpha King's expression tightened slightly. Because what he was witnessing was not normal behavior for a creature like this. It was not trained submission. It was response. The female lead whispered softly, almost to herself. You remember something. The beast did not move. But it did not deny it either. The boy peeked slightly from behind her. It's not scary now, he said quietly. The female lead placed a hand gently on his shoulder. It was never only that, she said. The Alpha King stepped slightly forward now, just enough to see clearer, and that was when the change became undeniable. The beast's attention was not divided anymore. It was fully centered on her, not as prey, not as threat, but as something that had meaning beyond instinct. The Alpha King's mind began to form a pattern. This was not random behavior. It was selective recognition, and that meant one thing: connection. Not learned, not forced, natural, ancient. The female lead slowly took one step forward. The beast did not retreat, stayed still, watching, waiting. She took another step. Still no reaction. The distance between them narrowed further. The boy's grip on her clothing tightened slightly, but he did not stop her. The Alpha King watched closely now, because this was the moment where instinct usually broke into violence or escape. But neither happened. Instead, the beast lowered its head even further, until it was almost level with her presence. The female lead stopped moving. Now they were close enough that the mud between them felt insignificant. The rain softened slightly, but no one noticed. The entire world had narrowed to this interaction. She looked at the beast carefully, not analyzing it as a threat, but as something she was trying to understand. The Alpha King felt something shift in his chest again, because she was not reacting like someone afraid of power. She was reacting like someone trying to interpret it. The beast made a small sound again. Different this time. Less tension. More uncertainty. The female lead tilted her head slightly. Do you know me? She asked softly. The question was not meant for a response. But the beast reacted anyway. Did not move. But something in its breathing changed. The Alpha King noticed it immediately. That shift meant recognition was not just external. It was internal. The boy behind her whispered, "It's listening." She didn't respond to him. Her focus remained entirely on the beast. And then, the beast took one final small step forward, and stopped directly in front of her, close enough that the space between them felt almost non-existent. The Alpha King's expression tightened, 'cause now there was no doubt. This was not aggression. This was acknowledgement. And something far older than conflict was beginning to surface. The female lead slowly lowered her hand again. This time the beast did not hesitate, did not attack, did not retreat, simply stayed, present, as if waiting for something that had not yet been spoken. The Alpha King felt the realization settle fully now. This creature was not just reacting to her presence. It was aligned with it. And that alignment suggested something far deeper than coincidence. Something instinctual. Something binding. Something that could not be easily explained by force or training. The female lead exhaled slowly. Not relief. Not fear. Just quiet understanding that something was forming between them that she could not yet name. Behind her, the boy finally relaxed slightly. "It's okay now," he whispered. She did not confirm it. But she did not deny it either. The Alpha King watched the entire moment unfold without moving. And for the first time since entering this territory, he understood that the situation was no longer about controlling chaos. It was about recognizing something that chaos itself had responded to. And that recognition was not ending here. It was only beginning to take shape. The transport cart had been abandoned just beyond the broken boundary road, half hidden behind a line of dead trees that bent under the weight of rain and time. It looked ordinary at first glance, just another rusted supply carriage left behind after years of neglect. But nothing about it was ordinary. Not the reinforced iron frame. Not the locked compartments built into its base. Not the faint sound of metal shifting inside it, even when no wind touched it. The female lead stood a few steps away from it, unmoving at first. The orphan boy stayed close behind her again, quieter now, as if even his breathing felt too loud in this space. The Alpha King stood farther back, watching without interrupting. And the beast lingered at the edge of the clearing, observing. The rain was lighter now, but it made everything look sharper instead of softer. Every drop hitting metal sounded louder. Every movement felt more defined. The world had narrowed again, but this time it wasn't tension from conflict. It was something colder. Recognition of what had been hidden. The female lead slowly stepped forward toward the cart. Her eyes scanned it carefully. The chains were visible now. Not hanging openly. Or organized. Not used recently but clearly maintained. That detail alone told her everything she needed to know. This was not leftover equipment. This was active infrastructure. The boy tugged her sleeve gently. "Don't go closer," he whispered. She placed her hand lightly over his. "I have to," she said. Her voice was calm, but something inside it had shifted. The Alpha King noticed immediately. This wasn't curiosity anymore. It was decision. She reached the cart and placed her hand on its side. The metal was cold. Too cold for something left outside naturally. She traced the edge slightly until she found a seam. Hidden latch system. Her eyes narrowed slightly. Behind her, the beast shifted its weight once. Not aggressively, but attentively, as if it understood what this object represented. The Alpha King stepped slightly forward now, closer than before, 'cause he recognized it too, not just as a cart, but as a transport system used for illegal movement of captives. The female lead pulled slightly on the latch. It didn't open easily. It resisted, like it had been designed to resist time and inspection. He tried again, harder this time. The metal clicked, and the side panel shifted open slightly. Sound escaped from inside. Not loud, but enough. Small breath. Then another. The boy froze immediately. The female lead opened the panel further. And the truth inside the cart became visible. Small restraints. Child-sized bindings. Not empty. Not unused. Recently stored. Her expression didn't change immediately. But something in her eyes tightened. Not shock. Not panic. Something heavier. Understanding that settled too deeply to be expressed quickly. The Alpha King saw it clearly now. This was not isolated crime. This was systemized movement. The kind that required protection from higher authority. The kind that could not exist without approval or blindness from those above it. The boy whispered again, trembling slightly. "They were in there before." The female lead closed her eyes briefly. Just for a second. Not to escape it, but to process it. Then she opened them again. And stepped fully to the cart. The Alpha King watched her closely. Because this was the moment most people broke. But she didn't. She changed direction instead. Purpose sharpened. She pulled the remaining latch and opened the cart fully. Chains inside shifted slightly. Metal clinking softly. Like something waiting to be used again. She turned slightly toward the Alpha King for the first time since arriving here. Their eyes met. And she asked one simple question. "Is this normal here?" Not accusation. Not emotion. Just truth-seeking. The Alpha King did not answer immediately. Because answering required acknowledgement of something deeper than border corruption. It required exposing structure failure. Finally he said quietly, "No." That single word carried more weight than any speech he had given in the council. The female lead nodded once. As if confirming something she already suspected. Then she turned back to the cart. The boy looked up at her. "What will you do?" he asked. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she placed her hand on one of the chains inside. Cold metal touched warm skin. And something about that contrast seemed to settle her decision. She looked toward the beast briefly, then back at the Alpha King, and finally said, "This ends here." Not a question. Not a hope. A decision. The Alpha King felt something shift in that moment. Because it wasn't emotion driving her anymore. It was direction. She pulled one chain out. It dragged against metal loudly. The sound echoed through the clearing. The beast reacted instantly. Not violently, but attentively, as if it recognized what was being revealed. The female lead held the chain in her hand for a moment, then looked at it, really looked at it. And something inside her expression changed. Not rage, not panic, clarity. She stepped back from the cart, and for the first time, the emotional restraint she had been holding since the arena began finally turned into action. She walked to the center of the clearing, placed the chain on the ground, then looked at the Alpha King. "Burn it," she said softly. The request was simple, but the meaning behind it wasn't. The Alpha King understood immediately. This was not destruction for anger. This was symbolic ending. The boy stepped slightly closer to her now, watching. The beast remained still. The rain slowed even more. The Alpha King didn't move for a second. Then he stepped forward. Slowly, he looked at the cart, the chains, at the structure behind them. And then he made a gesture. Signal. From somewhere unseen, movement began. Not loud, not chaotic, controlled. Wood was gathered quickly from nearby broken structures. Oil was poured without hesitation. The cart was dragged slightly forward into a clearing. The female lead watched everything without interfering. She had already made her part clear. Now it was execution. The Alpha King took a torch, held it for a moment, then looked at her. She nodded once. No fear, no hesitation, just confirmation. He lit it. The flame caught quickly, and the cart ignited. Fire spread across the metal and wood, climbing fast. Chains inside began to glow, then twist, then break under heat. The sound was sharp, metal screaming under transformation. The boy stepped back slightly but did not look away. The beast lowered its head slightly. Not in submission, but stillness, respectful stillness. The female lead watched the fire closely, not blinking, not moving, just absorbing it. The Alpha King stood beside her now, both of them watching the same fire. Different thoughts, same direction. The chains inside collapsed one by one. The structure that held them together losing meaning as heat consumed it. The female lead finally spoke again. Softly. "They won't use these again." The Alpha King replied. "No, Oz." Then he added, "Not here." The fire reflected in her eyes. And for the first time since this entire journey began, something inside her softened slightly. Not weakness, not doubt, release. The boy leaned lightly against her now. The beast stayed in place behind them. And the Alpha King realized something important as he watched the burning cart. This was not just destruction of evidence. This was declaration that what existed before this moment would not be allowed to continue unchanged. And as the fire grew stronger, casting light over all of them, the line between observer and participant disappeared completely. What remained was consequence, and the beginning of something irreversible. The fire from the burning cart had long turned into fading embers, but its glow still lingered in the air like a memory that refused to leave. The night had fully settled now over the borderlands, wrapping the clearing in a quiet that felt heavier than sound. The wind moved slowly through the dead trees, carrying faint traces of smoke. The ground beneath them was dark, uneven, still warm in places where the chains had burned. And in the center of that fading destruction, silence returned. Not empty silence, but loaded silence. The kind that forms when something important has already happened, and no one knows how to speak without changing it. The female lead stood a few steps away from the remaining ashes. The orphan boy stayed close to her side, leaning slightly against her now, exhausted but safe. His breathing was steadier than before, but his eyes still carried the weight of everything he had seen. The beast remained at a distance again, no longer aggressive, no longer uncertain, but present in a way that felt almost deliberate. And the Alpha King stood opposite her, not as ruler, not as observer, but as someone who had crossed into the same space of consequence she now occupied. The wind passed between them, and neither of them moved first. The female lead looked at the ashes for a long moment before speaking. Her voice was quiet, controlled, but not as steady as before. They were going to keep doing it, she said. It wasn't a question. It was a realization spoken aloud. The Alpha King didn't respond immediately, 'cause there was no easy answer to give. Finally he said, "Yes." That single word carried the weight of confirmation. Not reassurance, not comfort, truth. The boy shifted slightly beside her, holding onto her sleeve again. She placed her hand gently on his shoulder without looking down. The silence stretched again. This time, it wasn't the silence of tension. It was the silence of aftermath. The kind that follows choices that cannot be undone. The female lead finally turned her head slightly toward the Alpha King. Not fully facing him. Just enough. Her eyes studied him carefully. Not fearfully. Not blindly. Carefully. As if trying to understand something that had remained unclear since the beginning. "You knew," she said softly. It wasn't accusation. It was recognition. The Alpha King did not deny it. "I suspected," he replied. "Was." Then he added. "And I confirmed it here." Her gaze sharpened slightly. Not anger, but something more complicated. "Then why did it take this long?" she asked. The question was not harsh, but it carried weight. The Alpha King held her gaze. For a moment he didn't answer. Because the real answer was not simple enough to be spoken without consequence. Finally he said, "Because systems do not reveal themselves easily." The female lead looked away briefly. Not in dismissal. In thought. The boy tugged gently at her sleeve again. "Tired," he whispered. She knelt slightly to him, brushing his damp hair back. "You're safe now," she said softly. But even as she said it, she didn't fully sound convinced. The Alpha King noticed that immediately. Because safety in this world was not a fixed condition. It was temporary, fragile, conditional. The beast shifted slightly in the background. Not approaching. Not retreating. Just watching. Like it understood the importance of what was being spoken even without words. The female lead stood again. And when she did, she finally faced the Alpha King fully. The wind moved between them again. But this time it felt different. Not dividing. Connecting. She spoke again. Her voice quieter now. Not uncertain. But careful. "What happens now?" The question was not about politics. Not about territory. It was about continuation. The Alpha King understood that. He looked briefly toward the burned remains. Then back at her. "Now," he said slowly. "They respond." She didn't immediately ask who they were. Because she already understood. The council. The system. The structure behind silence. She exhaled slightly. Not relief. Not exhaustion. Something in between. Then she said quietly. "And will they stop it?" The Alpha King's expression tightened slightly. A rare moment of honesty forming in his voice. "Not easily," he admitted. That answer hung in the air longer than anything else. Because it was the first time anything had been said without certainty of success. The female lead looked down at her hands for a moment. They were still slightly stained with mud and ash. Evidence of everything that had just changed. The boy leaned closer to her again, almost asleep now from exhaustion. She steadied him gently. The Alpha King watched this silently. And something subtle shifted in his expression. Not realization of power, but recognition of burden. Because she had entered this situation as a protector of one child. And now stood at the edge of something much larger than that. The silence stretched again. Then she spoke. Softly. "I didn't think it would be this big." The Alpha King answered without hesitation. "It always is." That simplicity carried weight. The female lead looked up again. Their eyes met. And this time something unspoken passed between them. Not agreement. Not disagreement. Understanding. The kind that does not resolve tension, but changes its shape. The beast behind them lowered its head slightly again. not in submission, but stillness, as if acknowledging that whatever was forming between these two was now part of the environment itself. The wind passed through the clearing again, the embers finally dimming. The female lead broke eye contact first, not out of avoidance, but reflection. She looked at the boy, then at the ashes, then finally said, "I don't regret it." The Alpha King watched her carefully. "And you shouldn't," he replied. Then she added quietly, "But I didn't know it would lead here." The Alpha King nodded slightly. "Most people don't." Silence followed again. But this silence was no longer tense. It was transitional, like something had finished breaking, and something else had begun forming in its place. The female lead looked at him again. This time her voice was softer, not guarded, but uncertain in a different way. "Why are you still here?" The question was simple, but it carried something deeper beneath it. The Alpha King understood it immediately. Why remain involved? Why not step back into authority alone? Why not distance himself from what had become emotionally entangled? He looked at her for a long moment, then answered honestly, "Because leaving would not change what I've seen." Then he added, "And because you didn't step back either." That landed differently, not as praise, not as alignment, but recognition of shared refusal. The female lead didn't respond immediately, but something in her expression softened slightly. Not trust, not yet, but acknowledgement that she was no longer alone in what she had started. The boy stirred slightly, still half asleep. She adjusted him gently, pulling him closer to keep him warm. The Alpha King observed that quietly, and for the first time, the distance between them didn't feel like separation. It felt like space that was slowly being reduced by understanding neither of them fully controlled. The beast shifted once more behind them, still watching, still present, but no longer uncertain. And as the night deepened around the burned remains, the world beyond this moment still existed, still dangerous, still unresolved, but something fundamental had changed inside it. And none of them could return to what they were before standing in this silence together. The night over the borderlands had settled into a deeper stillness now, the kind that feels almost unreal after violence and fire. The ashes of the burned cart were no longer glowing. Only faint gray remains rested on the ground, scattered like fragments of something that used to hold power. Above them, the sky was heavy with slow-moving clouds. No stars were visible, only a dim, filtered darkness that made everything feel closer than it actually was. The female lead stood at the edge of the clearing, the orphan boy now fully asleep in her arms. His small body leaned against her shoulder, finally safe enough to let go of fear completely. His breathing was slow and steady, a fragile contrast to everything that had happened earlier. The Alpha King stood a few steps away. Not closer, not distant, just present, and the beast remained behind them both, no longer circling, no longer uncertain. It had settled into a still watchfulness, as if something inside it had accepted the outcome of everything that had unfolded. But the air between the female lead and the Alpha King was different now. Heavier, not with danger, but with something unspoken that had been building since the arena. The kind of truth that does not appear suddenly. It accumulates. The female lead shifted slightly to adjust the boy in her arms. She looked down at him for a moment, then back toward the dark field ahead. Her voice broke the silence first. Careful. What happens after tonight?" she asked. The Alpha King did not answer immediately, because the question wasn't simple. It wasn't about logistics. It wasn't about borders or councils or even justice. It was about direction, about what came after everything had been exposed. Finally he said, "After tonight, nothing returns to what it was." She didn't react quickly to that. She already understood it. But hearing it spoken made it more real. The wind moved slowly between them again, carrying faint traces of ash. The female lead shifted her gaze toward him. Her eyes were tired now, but still steady. "And the children?" she asked quietly. The Alpha King held her gaze. They will be recovered, he said. What remains of the network will be dismantled. Then he added. But it will not happen quickly. Her expression tightened slightly at that. Not disappointment. Understanding. Slow systems meant resistance. Resistance meant danger continuing in unseen places. The boy stirred slightly in her arms, then settled again. She adjusted him gently. The Alpha King watched that movement again. Something in his expression softened for just a moment, though it was subtle enough that most would miss it. But she didn't. She noticed everything now. After everything she had seen, she had learned to read silence as much as speech. She spoke again. You said I shouldn't have regret, she said quietly. The Alpha King nodded once. I meant it. Pause stretched between them. Then she asked the question that had been sitting behind everything since the council hall. What am I to you? The wind slowed. Even the beast behind them shifted slightly, as if reacting to something it could not interpret fully. The Alpha King didn't answer immediately, because this question was not political, not strategic, not even rational. It was personal in a way he had not allowed anything to be in a very long time. He looked at her. Really looked. Not as a variable. Not as a witness. But as someone who had stood between violence and innocence without hesitation. Someone who had not bowed to authority. Someone who had forced systems to reveal themselves just by refusing to step aside. Finally he said quietly, You are not what I expected to find here. That answer made her expression shift slightly. Not confusion, but patience. Waiting. He continued. And you are not what this world usually allows to remain unchanged. Silence followed. The female lead looked down briefly at the sleeping boy. Then back at him. That is not an answer, she said softly. Faint pause passed. Then the Alpha King exhaled slightly. For the first time, something like internal conflict showed in his expression. Because the answer he was avoiding was not about authority. It was about recognition. Something deeper. Something older than political structure. He took a step closer. Not enough to overwhelm. Just enough to close distance. The beast behind them lifted its head slightly. But did not move. The Alpha King spoke again. This bond you feel. It is not only yours. Her eyes sharpened slightly at that. Not fear. But awareness. The word bond changed the air. Not as romance. Not as claim. But as something instinctive. She took a small step back instinctively. Not from him. From uncertainty. The Alpha King noticed immediately and stopped moving forward. The space between them remained. Respected. He said more softly now. I feel it too. Silence followed that sentence like a ripple spreading through still water. The female lead's breath slowed slightly. Not because she accepted it. But because she could not ignore it anymore. Something inside her responded to that statement. Something she had been trying not to name since the arena. The boy in her arms shifted again slightly, waking just enough to open his eyes for a moment. He looked at both of them sleepily, then murmured, You're both sad. And then closed his eyes again. That small, innocent observation broke something in the tension. Not fully. But enough to soften its edges. The female lead looked down at him briefly, then back at the Alpha King. Her voice was quieter now. I don't understand what this means, she said. The Alpha King nodded. I do not fully understand it either, he admitted. That honesty changed something again. Because it removed dominance from the moment. Left only uncertainty shared equally. The wind moved again through the clearing. The beast remained still behind them, watching, but no longer reacting. The Alpha King finally spoke again. If it is what I believe it to be, it will not disappear. Her eyes narrowed slightly. And if I refuse it, she asked. The Alpha King held her gaze. Then said simply, Then it will still remain. That answer hung between them longer than anything else. Not forceful. Not threatening. Just inevitable. The female lead looked away briefly. Not in rejection. In thought. The idea of something existing without consent was not new to her. But something about this felt different. Not imposed, but shared. She exhaled slowly. "I don't trust things I can't control," she said quietly. The Alpha King replied without hesitation. "Neither do I." Then he added, "But this is not something either of us controls." Silence returned again. But it was no longer tense. It was reflective. The female lead shifted her stance slightly, adjusting the boy again. Her movements were slower now. Less defensive. More grounded. She looked at the Alpha King again. "This changes everything," she said softly. He nodded once. "It already has." The beast behind them lowered its head slightly again, as if confirming something that neither human had fully accepted yet. The female lead looked at the ashes one final time, then back at him. Her voice was quieter than before. "What do we do now?" The Alpha King paused, then said, "We continue." She studied him carefully. "Continue what?" He answered simply. "Truth." The word felt final in a different way than before. Not ending anything, but committing to something ongoing. The female lead stood there for a long moment. The boy asleep in her arms. The ashes behind her. The Alpha King in front of her. And something between them that had no clear shape yet. Finally she nodded once. Not acceptance. Not surrender. But acknowledgement that whatever this was, it was real enough to not ignore. The Alpha King didn't move closer. He didn't claim. He didn't insist. He simply remained where he was. And in that stillness, something unspoken settled between them. Not resolved. Not completed. But undeniably begun. Behind them, the beast remained watching into the dark. And the world beyond the clearing waited. Because nothing about this moment belonged only to them anymore. It belonged to everything that would follow.